Welcome to Slavery and Abolition, Chapter 8, Section 2, Presentation. The objectives for this lecture is first, to identify some of the key abolitionists. Second, describe the experience of slaves in rural and urban areas. And third, summarize the slavery debate in the South. So abolitionists are going to speak out. In this resettlement question, in the 1820s, over 100 anti-slavery societies advocate resettlement in Africa. Most free blacks consider themselves Americans, and few immigrate. About 1,400 do. Whites joined blacks calling for abolition, outlawing of slavery. There are no real anti-slavery sentiment in the North in the 1820s and 1830s, but in the 1830s that will change. You have gradualists who would like to see the gradual abolition of slavery. Then you have the immediatists who immediately want emancipation. William Lloyd Garrison was a very radical abolitionist. He believed that slavery and masonry undermined Republican values. He wanted immediate emancipation with no compensation for slaveholders and planters. He believed slavery was a moral, not an economic issue. He founded a few organizations, notably the New England Anti-Slavery Society, the American Anti-Slavery Society, and a newspaper called The Liberator, which called for immediate emancipation, freeing of slaves. The Liberator here is the premier issue of January 1st, 1831. Some notable black abolitionists. David Walker, he wrote an essay called The Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World in 1829. He believed that blacks should fight for freedom rather than wait to be set by free whites. Well, free blacks in America, Southern free blacks worked as day laborers and artisans. Northern free blacks given any lowest paying jobs, as Frederick Douglass wrote a book called The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass and was the editor-in-chief of a newspaper, the North Star. He was taught to read and write by one of his owner's wives. He escaped, and he was discovered by William Lloyd Garrison. He was asked to speak for the Anti-Slavery Society. The North Star is an abolition through political action. He's not going to call for immediate emancipation. He wanted to achieve abolition through political action over time. The slave population in the United States during this time, the population increases from 1.2 million in 1810 to 2 million in 1830. In the 18th century, most slaves were recent arrivals, and they work on small farms. By 1830, the majority are American, born here, and work on plantations or large farms. So life under slavery. Rural slaves on plantations, men, women, and children worked dawn to dusk in the fields. They are whipped, have little time for food, and no breaks for rest. Urban slavery in the cities. There was a demand in southern cities for skilled black slaves. Enslaved blacks would hire themselves out as artisans. Owners would hire their slaves, to factory owners to work in factories. And the treatment of slaves in the cities is a bit less cruel than on plantations. One of the first acts of violence or slave revolt was Nat Turner's rebellion. Nat Turner was a preacher. He leads a slave rebellion. About 60 whites are killed. Turner and the followers and innocent are captured, and 200 of them are killed in retaliation. This really woke up the southern states. As a result of that, the only state, a notable state, to debate the whole question of abolition was Virginia. And that was the last time. There's going to be backlash from the revolts, particularly Nat Turner's. Southern states are going to create slave codes to tighten limits on blacks. And free African Americans and slaves will lose their rights in the South. Some pro-slavery defenses. Slavery advocates used the Bible, the myth of a half-beast slave, as a defense. Southern congressmen are going to secure the adoption of a gag rule, which will limit or prevent debate about slavery. It's going to be used on the issue of slavery, and it deprives the rights of citizens to be heard. So the closing question on this is, why is slavery so central to many of the events leading to the Civil War? And if you look at the institution itself, you should be able to come up with some interesting answers. Thanks for watching. See you next time.